Pass the popcorn. 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 Pass the popcorn.
Welcome to Alternate Ending, where we're discovering good movies, one bad movie at a time. I'm your co-host, Tim Brayton, critic in residence. Joining me through the magic of Zoom, all the way from sunny California, is Brennan Klein, our horror expert and man about town. How are you doing, Brennan?
I'm doing great. I truly am a man about town, and I wish I wasn't because it is so fucking humid here. I sweat through an entire shirt and a half yesterday. It's been rough.
That is exciting to me, because you're not used to the humidity out there in California, yeah? That's
no,
like
it's
sort of a dryish heat.
It's a dry heat. That's the thing.
Yeah. I am used to humidity in that it is a daily part of my life, but I am not used to it in that every time it happens, I become a giant whiny baby who wants to die. So I feel you. Haven't had to replace a shirt midday at any time recently, but it still sucks. It is the dog days of summer. It's August, so we're here to just talk a little bit about movies, about the state of things. No particular topic. We're going to kind of feel our way through it, see where it goes. Rob and Carrie are currently on vacation, and having a sense of structure or any kind of goal in mind is sort of their thing. I'm more just about letting the chaos flow. So we're going to see where it takes us.
Yeah, it's going to be it's an experiment. It's like that thing where you put on a blindfold and walk around your house and suddenly realize you don't know where any shit is in your house.
I haven't done that, but it sounds like a fun thing that I will have to try now.
It's a very fun experiment, and I'm very bad at it.
All right. Love it.
But yes, so, if Rob and Carrie, I don't know if they've seen their home in the last 2 years. I feel like they're always out somewhere, but yes, it's just the two of us. The cats are away.
Exactly. No, the cats are right here. They might even put on an appearance. But yeah, so yeah, I guess, we talked about the weather, so that got the small talk out of the way. We have some ideas for what we might want to pull out. If you're listening to this, you probably read the show notes, so you know more than we do where we're going with this. But
You're from the future.
You're from the exactly. It's dramatic irony. You know more than the protagonists do. But I think we are gonna probably start with just talking a little bit about worth mentioning, the movies we've seen of late.
Mm-hmm.
That we think are interesting, or maybe not interesting, but we want to grapple with them anyway. So you want to kick us off? What have you seen recently that's been cool?
I don't know about cool, but actually, since we're kind of in charge, can I just run through like kind of a brief list of, you kind of mentioned the titles they've been watching, but I could give like a tiny blurb for a couple things and then like land on the thing that I'm actually like prepped to talk about.
Please do.
Okay, great. Well, I did see the movie that Carrie pathologically cannot remember the title of, which is Marcel the Shell with Shoes On.
I'm very excited. I have still not quite seen it.
Yes, I actually, you have to have an appetite for the twee, but it's also got more of a bite than you might expect. Just a little. It's a nibble. It'll gum you a little bit.
I'm expecting no bite whatsoever, so even a tiny bit of a bite will rise above my expectations.
Yes, but it was extremely charming, and okay. I was not prepared to care about it at all because I have Am
I going to dislike it, or am I going to out and out hate it, do you think?
I have trouble because with you are such a misanthropic kind of being, but you do open your heart to certain extremely cute things like Baby Groot, or I believe Detective Pikachu.
I did like Detective Pikachu quite a lot.
Yeah, so it just really, really depends. I think you will go to dislike rather than hate. Getting you to like, I think, would be a challenge. But I think you could get there.
All right, I'm excited. I'm excited to enter the movie with an open mind and a warm heart and merely land at this movie was no good, but it didn't make me feel sick to my stomach.
Yes, I think that's exactly where we're gonna get to.
Great, I love it. I'm excited.
Mm-hmm. Also, there's some interesting meta stuff going on in that the star and the director, who also appears in the movie, are divorced.
They sure are.
And the movie is extremely aware of that fact.
Oh boy.
But it's interesting. It's interesting.
Okay. Is it like Scenes from a Marriage with an animated shell?
No, not at all.
Oh.
I mean, that would be great.
That would be, I love it.
Anyway, I also watched, I showed my boyfriend Poltergeist for the first time. And that movie, it grows on me every time I watch it.
The 2009 version, you mean?
No, the 2015 version.
Oh, whatever year it was.
Yeah, no, not the Rosemary DeWitt, Sam Rockwell one. No, the original 82 Poltergeist. I don't care who directed it. I don't want to talk about it. I'm sorry I brought it up. I just think it's an exercise in a lot of different tones, and I know that can feel uneven, but this time all of the disparate tones really worked for me. It has a stronger comic backbone than I remembered. And this time,
which is wild because whoever directed it, the one thing the two men have in common is that they're both absolute shit at comedy.
Yeah, which was surprising. But it's just got this extremely, it's almost laconic but it's confident because it knows exactly what it's doing and how to do it, and it's accomplishing it. And this time in particular, Jo Beth Williams really knocked my socks off. Like, I think that is a perfectly cast movie, but it's sometimes hard to look past the spotlight that is Zelda Rubinstein and Heather O'Rourke, because those are both perfect for the roles that they're playing. Zelda
Rubinstein in that movie is one of the highlights of 80s horror, full stop, to me.
Yeah. It's just perfect. But also, Oliver Robbins, the kid who plays the son, he has this really excellent moment when he hears Carol Ann in the TV for the first time, and he has this kind of wordless, kind of wailing reaction to it that really, really kind of chilled my spine a little bit this time.
Excellent, I like that. I need to rewatch that movie. I've seen it twice. I have not loved it either time. I would be hard pressed to say why I don't love it, but I do need to revisit it just because I feel it's a major touchstone for people, and it feels bad to me that I don't like it more than I do.
Yeah, no, it's totally fair because it's one of those movies that it does have it's got a muchness to it and a not enoughness in this weird combination.
That's a good, yeah, I agree with that.
But it really was the right time for me to watch it this
cool.
week, apparently. And then real quick, I watched a Bollywood zombie movie called Zombivli, which is set in the Mumbai-adjacent slum of Dombivli, and it's about zombies in Dombivli.
Now that you've explained that to me, the title's excellent, and I like it a lot.
Yeah, me too. It's one of the best things about the movie, unfortunately.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
It's an extremely mediocre zombie comedy because it's extremely bloodless. Because as much as Bollywood cinema can be a cinema of excess, it's not a very bloody cinematic tradition. Not necessarily gory, even though it can be extremely violent. But the movie did have an extremely precise, like, Train to Busan-esque political satire going on. Especially, it was very clearly meant to evoke the way that people in the slums were treated by rich people during the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that I thought was really interesting, but then you're also watching a 2-hour mediocre zombie comedy, so it's just like, well, there you go.
This reminds me, well, we'll get there. I don't want to spoil my worth mentioning quite yet, but...
Okay, well then, yeah, I'll land on where I actually wanted to be, which is that I also, again, showed my boyfriend for the first time 1988's A Fish Called Wanda. Do you have...
picture.
You like it? Okay, good.
I like it. It's a good movie.
It's such a charming film, and I guess this is the one where I guess I'll dive into the plot a little bit for people who haven't seen it. It's basically about this quartet of criminals who have robbed a bank. They've pulled off a jewel heist. One of them has double-crossed the others by taking the jewels from the original hiding place and putting it somewhere unknown. And the others have double-crossed him by sending him to jail. And thus begins a comedy of errors as different people with extremely different intentions try to find the loot, but also figure out whether it is wise to keep pretending to be friends with the guy that they turned in or fuck him over entirely. It's got John Cleese, Jamie Lee Curtis, Michael Palin, and Kevin Kline, who is on some...
Oscar winner Kevin Kline.
For this movie?
For this movie.
Okay, thank God. He's really good in this movie.
Yes, he is.
He is on some Bugs Bunny bath salts in this movie. I don't know what he's up to, but it's genius.
It's one of the best comic ensembles ever put into one movie, and it's incredible that given that, Klein is very obviously the one who's, like, standing out.
Yes, absolutely. Like, you've got 2 members of Monty Python in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin Kline is just knocking it out of the park. And, of course, Jamie Lee Curtis is the thing that ties everything together, and she is excellent. As kind of a woman who is too smart, but not quite smart enough to get everything she wants to get done.
She's smart enough to be the smartest one in the room, and also smart enough to overestimate her own intelligence.
Yes, exactly.
Which is a perfect thing for both Crimes Gone Wrong and for farce. So it's really a wonderful bit of characterization.
Absolutely. And there are these 2 big farce set pieces. There's obviously the big chase at Heathrow in the end, but there's also Jamie Lee Curtis is trying to seduce the lawyer, and his wife comes home early, and the guy pretending to be her brother who's actually her jealous boyfriend, and there's just a lot of moving pieces, and it's just really astonishing how they're all able to come together.
That's my favorite scene in the movie, for sure.
It's so good.
It's so good.
Anyway, and it had fewer jokes that don't hold up than I expected on this rewatch.
Good, because 80s comedy, I think, is unusually prone to that as well.
Yeah, it's got some homophobic shit. It's got some, extremely ableist shit in that, like, Michael Palin's character stutters, and the way that people treat him is very 80s. But, like, ultimately, it's such a tight comedy. And it was number 7 in the box office that year. Can you imagine a movie like this doing that in the past 20 years?
That, to me, is a quintessential example of a movie that I don't know if it would today match its box office then, unadjusted for inflation.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have that kind of movie. And when they come out, they don't make money.
Yeah, I mean, because the stuff I feel like I could compare it to is, like, just those weird indie things like Ben Wheatley's Free Fire, or, stuff that just doesn't make a splash anymore.
Yeah, exactly. No, great movie. I'm glad you rewatched it. I have to ask, how did your boyfriend find it? Did he love it so much? He
really, really liked it.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, he loves crime caper, especially heist movies. Like, this is not a heist movie, but it's got that flavor.
Heist is in its family tree.
Yeah. So he really liked it, and we actually, I have a big stack of movies that we are going to watch together, and basically what he does is picks one, and that's what we watch. And he wanted to watch it because we recently encountered a clip from a podcast that Jamie Lee Curtis hosts that we were unaware of existing, where she just completely, like, she's interviewing Leah Michele and Jonathan Groff from Spring Awakening, and just completely rips Leah Michele to shreds by reminding her that she didn't get nominated for a Tony for that play.
Oh.
But, like,
that seems unkind.
Well, Leah Michelle's unkind, first of all.
I know nothing about Leah Michele whatsoever.
Literally any story anyone has told about working with her sounds like pure torture.
Okay, good to know.
But also, I think Jamie Lee was just trying to be Barbara Walters and just trying to get the conversation going into a hard place. But it's literally Leah Michele, Jamie Lee just like, oh, so did the show get any nominations? And Leah's like, yes, we won 8 Tony Awards. And Jamie Lee was like, yes, you did. But you didn't, Leah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It was Leah Michele found dead, never seen again.
Man, oh man.
Anyway, she's great. Sorry, you talk about movies or whatever.
I mean, I like movies. Movies are good. So my own recent viewing history has been just completely dominated by Charlie Chaplin films. I decided this summer I think I've talked about this on the air before, but this summer I decided to treat myself, something I've been wanting to do for years now. I'm watching every single thing Charlie Chaplin made. So every film starring Charlie Chaplin. the very small number of films he directed that he did not appear in or appeared in very briefly. So the entire 81 filmography of Charlie Chaplin, less the one film that is missing. And this is the week that I arrived at 1915, which is the year that he shifted from Keystone, where he made 36 films, to S&A Studios, where he made, I believe, 14 films. And 1915 is also the year that Charlie Chaplin sort of went from like, oh, this guy's really funny, we love him, to internationally recognized icon of cinema, Charlie Chaplin. Mm-hmm. And so it's been just terribly gratifying, because like some of those early shorts they're funny, I like them, but they're pretty much like, how are we going to get to the brick factory so people can start chucking bricks at each other's heads this time? Like there's a sort of very formulaic quality to them. Those 1915 films, especially like the second half of the year, he's really starting to just like experiment with being the little tramp and like mixing comedy with sort of sentiment and pathos and a kind of, you can start seeing where he begins to pull in the anti-establishment vibe that sort of dominates his later films, where it's like, he's the little tramp, he's a little homeless guy who's being crushed by the system, and that's unjust and unfair, and we're going to sort of root for him to make the rich people look like assholes for 20 minutes or whatnot. So I've been really enjoying that. It's really been a very exciting project for me. But I'm not here to talk about Charlie Chaplin, because Charlie Chaplin he's a known quantity. If you don't know Chaplin at this point, God help you. I am instead here to talk about the only new release film I have seen really in the last fortnight, or at least 10 days, which is no longer the reigning #1 film. It was dethroned by DC League of Super Pets. But prior to that, it was Jordan Peele's Nope, his third film as a writer-director, which made a ton of money, and a ton of money that is less of a ton than his first two movies, which I think's, a little bit concerning, but still made a shitload of money for an original film, a shitload of money for the pandemic era we're living in. In fact, it, I believe, made the most money in its opening weekend of any non-IP film since Jordan Peele's last feature, which was Us in 2019.
Yes, that's correct.
And I'm going to tread a little bit lightly talking about what Nope is, because they've been doing a very good job of not really explaining what it is, other than probably aliens. And it is aliens. I don't think that's giving anything away.
Yeah, I don't see how it could be. I have not seen it yet, and I intend to see it. But it seems extremely clear that it's aliens.
But what about aliens?
Yeah, I guess.
There's things about the second half that are not apparent, but
cool.
So it is a film about aliens. There are aliens appearing sort of over a gulch in California, where there is a horse ranch. And the horse ranch is owned by a pair of siblings played by Keke Palmer and Daniel Kaluuya, who they rent horses to the film industry, basically, and they've fallen on hard times. In the film's opening scene, we see their father, Keith David, die in a very mysterious incident involving metal falling from the sky. And so he leaves them with a failing movie rental horse ranch that they're not really equipped to run. And they fairly quickly realize that aliens are about and decide this is going to be the way we make money. We're going to get a picture of these aliens and sell that and become famous and so on and so forth. So that's kind of like the thrust of the plot, and where the movie goes with that is sort of the secret that they're keeping, and there are secrets to be kept. Okay. But before they get to that sort of point, there's so the film breaks into two halves, very, very, very crisply, and it is difficult even to talk about that break without giving away some secrets. But I will say the first half is the sort of very Jordan Peele-esque, this genre exercise is a metaphor for something else. And the second half is a slightly less Jordan Peele-esque, but still pretty Jordan Peele-esque. I love movies so much, and I'm going to make the moviest movie I can. Mm-hmm. And it basically, It's the pivot from Jordan Peele's Close Encounters of the Third Kind to Jordan Peele's War of the Worlds.
Okay.
It's sort of the shift that the movie makes between its first and its second halves, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, for me, just from seeing the promotional materials, I am going to see Nope because it's a new Jordan Peele movie. It's a new horror movie. Those are things that I watch. But nothing about it has compelled me to see it like on its own merits.
I am not going to be the thing that changes that for you.
Yeah, I saw your star rating.
So here's where I'm at. I think the second hour or second half, it's a 2 hour and 15-minute movie, and I'm not quite sure where the break happens. The War of the Worldsian half is so good.
Did you say 2 hour and 15 minutes?
It is 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Jesus Christ.
It's a movie. Movies are long. That's what movies do.
Just who has the time?
I mean, this is why I'm excited for League of Super Pets. It's a nice tight hour and 49 minutes.
49 minutes? It's about Superman's dog.
It's about Superman's dog.
Oh my God.
Superman
everything.
himself has been the subject of 3 hour movies, so Superman's dog being the subject of a 2 hour movie seems perfectly appropriate to me.
That is 79 minutes max, my friend.
I'll also remind you, it's about both Superman's dog and Batman's dog. I think it's about how Batman gets his dog, no less.
Yeah, but one of them is Kevin Hart.
Yeah, and the other one's The Rock.
Well, it's a comedy in the 2020s. It's got to be 20 minutes longer than it needs to be.
Is it? Is it going to be a comedy or is it going to be a tragedy?
Oh my God. Godspeed to you.
But neither of us have seen League of Super Pets, whereas we are. I'm hopefully going to talk about that a little bit more. But
sorry, yeah, go for it.
No. Just basically that second half of the overly long movie, and by God, it is overly long, but it has almost nothing but good stuff in that second half, and 3 particular sequences are on par with anything that anyone has done in a thriller in the last 5 or 10 years. It is really remarkably good. Jordan Peele has an eye. He knows pacing. He's really good with actors. And he loves movies, and I think that's really something that comes through all of his stuff, really, including a sketch comedy from before he became a film director. He's just a film buff, and he's the kind of film buff who makes the movies he wants to watch, and I think that is always a good place to be. I'm much happier with people who love movies and want everyone else to love movies compared to just, for example, the Russo brothers, who seem to detest movies with an almost indescribable fervor. Mm-hmm. I have not seen The Gray Man yet. I know you have. I know you reviewed it for the site. It feels like it's going to be the worst experience of my life.
Yeah, let me just say, it's a shame that the title The Empty Man was already taken.
Hey! So that. But, so the second hour of Nope is just so fucking good. See it on the biggest screen level shit, all the bromides that critics use. But, really, really good time. The first half, I could barely get through. I found it some of the most disastrous storytelling I have sat through in a very, very long time. I don't want to go into details because, again, there are shifts and there are twists and there's whatnot. But I have always felt that the thing that Jordan Peele is really specifically not good at, that he really clearly wants to be good at, is using genre as an allegory for the state of society.
Yeah, that's the thing that everybody tells him he's good at.
Everyone tells him he's good at, because Get Out got nominated for Best Picture, which is, I think, fucking ridiculous. It's a solid movie, but Best Picture was over the top. But anyway, so that happens. Critics just jizz so hard that their pants just blow a hole for Get Out. And I think Get Out's allegory is fine, but it is a more overworked and tough version of precisely the same allegory as the Stepford Wives.
Oh, uh-huh.
And it's already a little bit clumsy in the Stepford Wives, I think. So that happens with Get Out. Then with Us, he just loses the allegory. Like, I don't even fucking know what's going on in the last 5 minutes of Us. I think Us compensates for it. It's still my favorite Jordan Peele film.
It's gorgeous and it's scary, but it's incoherently
It's gorgeous,
satirical.
scary, and incoherent, which basically means it's an Italian movie, and we know how I feel about Italian horror movies. But no, so I think Us works because Jordan Peele, the director, is too good at making images. And he cannot allow Jordan Peele, the allegorist, to take that away from him. In the first half of Nope, Jordan Peele, the allegorist, is just riding hard. And in particular, there's an entire subplot. And it is a subplot built around the tragic past of a side character played by Stephen Ewan, who was a child actor. He was on the star of a like really stupid looking family sitcom in the 90s that had a chimpanzee as his co-star, and one day the chimpanzee like snapped, and there's like this whole thing about like animals on set, and the first thing that happens in the movie after Keith David dies, like the first post-title scene, is the horse that Daniel Kaluuya has brought to be in a TV commercial freaks out and kicks like a grip in the head. So like there's this whole runner about like animals on set and like what are we doing with that, and like is that an appropriate thing. So there's this subplot about a chimpanzee that many years ago like went crazy and freaked out on a set, and this is the traumatic backstory of this side character, and he is, to be clear, the side character, and not even a side character that the movie ends up having a whole lot to do with. And the chimpanzee material in particular serves absolutely nothing resembling a narrative function. Like, no element of the alien plot has any goddamn thing to do with the chimpanzee. So the chimpanzee's function in the film is 100% about theme, 100% about allegory, not in any way about storytelling or structure. And I find that very much a turnoff. Like, and this is getting back to what I was going to say and then stop myself from saying when you were talking about that Bollywood film. I have no issue with a good, well-built story bending itself towards like a sort of subtext and allegory. When the allegory becomes the story and there's not a well-built script undergirding it, that's when I'm like, nope, no, that's when I can't cope with that anymore. Like, you need the fundamentals. If you get the fundamentals, you may then make your movie about a message. But if you make your movie about a message and the fundamentals aren't there, I turn on that so fucking hard. And that's what Nope is doing for the first hour. It is just not telling a story. It is focused so hard on this very complicated web of symbolism, and there's like 5 or 6 different things that it's trying to symbolize, like animals, and whether or not it's appropriate to view violent spectacle, and the history of black people in Hollywood and how that's been written out and whatnot. It's just doing too much. I don't think it's doing any of it terribly well, because all of it's sort of extrinsic to the story. And when it becomes about the story, when it just becomes about there's aliens in a gulch and they're running away from the aliens, it becomes great. But that first hour was really tough for me to get through. So that's dope.
Yay. I don't know. Yeah, because I don't know. I guess I'm on and off with like subtext or allegorical cinema too, because there's stuff like, well, it is an extremely delicate balance. You have to. There's just a lot of contextual things that can really get in the way of telling a story like that and still having it be satisfying. Like when Disney is trying to talk about racism in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is their like rah paramilitary nonsense. And it's a corporation saying this, and I'm like, well, none of this makes sense contextually. And you are asking me to think about this broader real-life problem, which makes me want to think about all the broader real-life problems with the people making this. And like, there needs to be this exact recipe for that to work. I do think it largely works in Get Out. I think that I do agree that film was like praised overly for doing the thing that it does well. But it's accomplishing the goal that it sets out, and it seems like that that Peele now thinks that he's the one who does that thing, and now everyone else who is like, I want to make a Jordan Peele movie, thinks that they need to do that thing, and it's not really been good after that.
And to be very clear, no one does that thing as well as Jordan Peele, even when he's not doing it very well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was that ridiculously terrible horror movie about slavery from the producers of Get Out, as the poster
Antebellum.
Antebellum. I think the directors of that movie need to be like locked in a padded room. That is a revolting screenplay.
Cinema is interesting.
Cinema is very interesting. But no, I guess, I mean, for me, the thing is, like, if a movie's going to have that kind of subtext and message, like, the best I can hope for is that it is unobtrusive enough that I can ignore it, because I do not want it. So for me, it's more of like, could I tolerate this allegory or could I not? And in the case of Dope, I cannot.
That's totally fair. And I do think, so we kind of had a plan in the back of our heads to talk about kind of the state of modern horror specifically, and I think we should launch into that kind of off the launch pad of Nope, but first let's take a really quick break.
Let's take a really quick break.
Okay, so...
before we take that break, got anything rattling around in it's weird for me to say Tim Sack. This is Rob's thing, is to call it Tim Sack. It's my sack.
It is your sack.
How's my sack doing, Brennan?
It's doing really well. So I put out the call about 45 minutes before the recording, as is tradition, to the Discord group to ask for some questions for Tim Sack. I apologize. I'm only going to pick one because we've been running a little longer than I thought we might.
Great. We love to be running long. This is not a podcast devoted to concision.
No, it is certainly not. We're still not going to be as long as Nope was, so that's fine.
Hey. Don't test me. Don't make it a challenge.
Okay. No, that's fair. But also, if it was as long, you could still listen to us while doing literally anything else, which is a benefit to podcasts. Anyway, this question comes in from Gavin McDowell, and this is something that's been coming from him across many channels on the Discord, which is, how on earth do professional critics take notes in dark theaters? So, Tim, what's your process?
I use my big old brain, baby.
Oh, you don't even take notes at all?
I don't take notes.
Ever?
I take notes when I'm writing slasher movie reviews for the Summer of Blood specifically, because I want to make absolutely certain that I get the body count right.
Wow. Okay, well then I will answer Gavin's question.
I will say this. Part of that is the kind of reviews I want to write. I don't write reviews that are really all that invested in recapping the plot, so the details of the plot don't matter terribly much. Mm-hmm. And anything that I want to talk about because it stands out as being so good or so bad is not likely to be something that I forget about.
That makes sense. I don't trust my memory enough for that. So, like, when I take notes, I take the briefest plot notes, especially, like, I try to get character names down, so, especially if it's in a movie where...
This is what you got the IMDb for you.
Yeah, well, see, here's the thing. So, like, if all the actors are recognizable, I'm like, okay, great. But if it's a bunch of indistinguishable white women in a movie that are not that famous, I'm like, okay, I need to write this down, because I don't know who is who.
Sure, that's right.
Like, if I'm watching Sorority Row, you know?
Yeah, no, that kind of movie, one definitely does have to figure out how to disambiguate the identical characters.
Yeah, so, like, I like to use notes for that, and I like to use notes to just capture my impressions of, like, here's a good shot, I like the music here, because I don't want to forget anything, especially because I don't always write my reviews right away. Like, sometimes it might be a day or two. So I have taken notes in a dark theater. It's not easy. They always look horrible. They do look like, I scrawled them in blood on the side of the pit where I was being kept.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I have a little, like, flippy, spiral-bound notebook. I'm showing Tim, but you can't see it.
Yeah, I was going to say, for those of you in podcast land, I'm currently looking at the flippy spiral notebook. It's one of those little one of those little like 3x5 jobs or 2.5 by 4, however big it is.
Yeah.
One of those little jobs, like you sort of see like a traffic or a meter, like one of those cops who makes sure that your meter hasn't gone over.
Yeah, exactly. So when I'm watching a movie at home, I have lights, so that's totally fine, and I can use all of the all of the little lines. I was trying to like be, because humor comes from specificity, and I was trying to remember the name for like wide rule or the regular type of rule, but I just couldn't. I failed at that joke. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's the humor is both about specificity, but it's also about workshopping and finding the best possible shape of the joke. So those of you who are listening to the podcast, if you know what the standard width ruled notebook paper is called,
college rule.
College rule.
I remembered.
Do you want to go back? Do you want to go back and start that joke over again?
No. Let's just pretend I said it right, and we can laugh. Ha 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 ha. Okay.
College rule.
Mm-hmm. Anyway,
there should be a movie called College Rule, and it should be like a modern day like snobs versus slobs frat type movie, and it's about like dictators in college.
Yeah. Okay, so it's like what Mussolini was up to in a frat,
or maybe royalty, because dictators don't rule; royalty rules.
You're right. Royalty rules, dude.
Totally. No, it should be like a prince in college, and it's called College Rule.
Okay, there is. I feel like there are plenty of those, but none of them have nabbed the title, and that is a failure.
This is the point. This is how you stand out in a crowded marketplace, is with a good, pithy pun title.
Exactly.
Netflix, you can have that one for $10,000. It's all yours.
Yeah, they actually they're putting out a movie called Royalteen, so they are not listening.
Oh, that's a good title. I just had a little frisson, like that little sort of like, oh, my whole back just kind of like rolled up and down the skin. Royalteen. I like that.
That's good. But yeah, so I have those little notebooks. So basically, in a dark theater, I try to keep my thumb on the paper where the next line should be, just to avoid writing over myself, because that is an extremely it's an extreme possibility. But here's the thing. Sometimes when I'm watching a movie in theaters that I'm going to review, I am with a partner, and sometimes that partner demands to hold one of my hands on occasion. And this can be a challenge.
I find the idea of physical affection in a movie theater revolting. You're there to watch a movie. You're not there to be intimate with someone you love.
I'm not wanking him off.
I don't even acknowledge the presence of the people I'm at the movie with. As soon as the trailers are done, they're dead. They have died. They're not real. If they try to touch me, if they try to whisper something, I just ignore them. The same way that you would ignore a deranged panhandler on the street trying to tell you about aliens.
That is good to know. And
movie is church.
Mm-hmm. When I'm sitting in front of Thor: Love and Thunder, I don't feel particularly religious. So sometimes I'll touch a person.
Okay.
So anyway, when that's the case, I just divide the paper into segments in my mind where it's like, okay, this line will go on the top, this line will go in the middle, this line will go on the bottom, and that way and then, it's a waste of paper, and I apologize. I recycle all of my notebooks. But that's just kind of the way I kind of organize it myself so as not to just get completely out of control. But I do know a critic, and I will not call this person out, but I do know someone who writes notes on their phone, but just make sure to sit in the back row, and I'm like, that's still probably annoying to someone, but at least you're trying.
Is it Manola Dargis?
It's not.
Oh, that'd be
at least
cool.
I mean, she might do that, but I don't know her personally.
I've met her twice. It was very fun.
She seems really nice. I've heard her on podcasts, so we're basically friends.
I made a giant idiot of myself in front of her at a Q&A, and it's one of the proudest moments of my life.
Tell me more.
I don't remember the details. I just remember saying something that ended up feeling like a really idiotic question that was beneath her contempt. But I'm curious, in terms of note-taking, because this is the experience I've had as a sort of, as you might say, professional student. I find that the act of writing the thing down encodes it so hard into my memory that I almost never have to go back over my notes from a class, because the note-taking itself is what sort of creates that. Do you find that that's true when you're note-taking during a movie, that it's sort of like just the fact that you've written down he's wearing a red sweater. Like, the red sweater has now become, like, a concrete reality to you.
It can be. Definitely, especially for a movie that actively makes an impression on me. I can usually just bang out that review, and then I'll look through my notes later and make sure I didn't miss anything. But I just my memory is not concrete enough all the time. It's just not reliable enough that I want to make sure I get everything.
That's fair. For me, I guess it's that the only thing I'm good at is remembering details of movies. It is the solitary thing for which I have evolved.
Yes. No, that is also one of my core competencies, but like I want to make sure I get everything. Sure. And that is a fault of mine. I am a completist. I like the idea that a single thing could slip away from me makes me panic, and that's why I take notes.
I get that. So quite a good conversation for quite a straightforward question. So thank you, Gavin.
Yeah, thank you, Gavin.
Carrie, you and I try to stay healthy, right?
You know, I mean, I try to exercise most days. I eat a lot of egg whites and kale until about 4 p.m. And then I'm just chips and dip until bedtime.
Same. And like you, Care, packing all the healthy stuff in meals to try to reach my goals hasn't worked. And, you know, I hate taking vitamins and pills.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, Athletic Greens AG1 has the answer. With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, adaptogens to help start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy recovery, focus, and aging. All the things.
But here's the thing. It sounds great, but it also sounds like it tastes kind of healthy.
No, it actually tastes great, not healthy. It has a tropical flavor that makes me think of our upcoming trip to the Caribbean. And it will leave you feeling more alert and clear during the day. Also helps you get your Z's.
You know I can use all those things, but Rob, you also know I'm a little bit cheap. So how much would something like this set us back?
Care, it's cheap enough even for you.
Whoa!
AG1 is less than $3 a day, so you're investing in your health instead of that cold brew habit.
Okay, all right. Sign me up.
Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is go to athleticgreens.com/emerging. That's EMERGING. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/emerging to take ownership of your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
Anyway, I guess we're back from break. You in the audience have just listened to that ad where Carrie and Rob talk about eating plants or whatever. So that must have been jarring, and I apologize.
Yeah, I never like hearing them talk about eating plants. Dead animals. That's the only way to go. I like to think of one of God's creatures having suffered horribly to nourish me.
Yeah, well, no, see, that's just your vibe,
Exactly.
and you're just super cool.
The world is full of violence and suffering, and it would be disingenuous and hypocritical of me to remove myself from that process.
Yeah. Speaking of violence and suffering,
I'm gonna have some veal for lunch. That sounds like a good choice.
do you have access to veal? I wouldn't know where to find veal.
The veal shop.
What? What?
Veals are us. I live in Wisconsin. Of course I fucking have access to veal.
Okay, I don't know.
Not some hippie granola LA type.
No, that's true. I could. I have had trouble finding cranberries lately, which has been upsetting to me. But yeah,
Well,
no,
you know what else we make in Wisconsin besides
Cranconsin?
Cranconsin. No, cranberries. Biggest cranberry producer in the United States.
Really?
Yep. Northern Wisconsin.
Okay. I'll come visit when the humidity drops.
You should.
Actually, I want to at some point. I still
I
haven't met
think you
Carrie.
would find it disappointing.
Oh, of course. I'm not visiting Wisconsin to see the sights. I just want to see more. I mean, you're not going to let me into your apartment, but I want to see more of your apartment than just the Beauty and the Beast poster behind you that I see every time we talk on Zoom.
There's an Aladdin poster.
Oh yeah, hello. But yeah, I know. I'm sure the second I show up in Wisconsin, you'll be like, actually, I'm busy. It's fine. But I'll peek in through your windows, and I'll
Sounds great. Sounds like a real plan. Let's do that.
Okay, great. Anyway, let's talk about horror movies.
Let's talk about horror movies on the subject of peeking in people's windows. Because that's something that's creepy.
It is creepy.
And sometimes you peer in somebody's window because you're a psycho killer. And you're going to stab them.
You do.
With a knife.
Or a spade.
Or a spade.
A weed whacker sometimes. Or, well, you don't really stab with
You don't stab someone with a weed whacker, Jesus Christ. But no, there's so many edged weapons, so many garden implements. I think those are the two categories, right? Garden implements and edged weapons.
Primarily.
I mean,
we can get creative.
You can get creative, but it's not like people are using guns. That ruins the of the thing.
Yeah, if we're talking about slasher and then kind of horror in general, I think Scream follows a set of rules that I think I can abide by, which is that the slasher portion of the movie is all knives, and then the whodunit portion is all guns, and I'm fine with that.
I think it is a useful thing for that formula because it helps break the movie into phases in a way that I really like. Mm-hmm. I do enjoy the Friday the 13th-esque every kill is a different device.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
Because that's what I'm looking for in a slasher movie, is that feeling of of creativity. It's like gags. It's like watching a Buster Keaton. You don't want to see him fall off the same thing over and over again. You want to see him fall off different things.
Absolutely. I mean, well, we've talked about Scream so much, but since I accidentally on purpose brought it up, I do think that Scream is almost miraculous in the way that it finds different things to do with the same knife, and it doesn't necessarily feel boring. I know we have different opinions on the Scream films.
The things I do not dispute is that Scream has good kills.
Hooray! Thank you. But most of the time when it is just the same weapon, it gets extremely exhausting for me as well. You got to switch up the MO.
You know, I mean, there's a reason why the best kill in the Friday the 13th franchise doesn't even involve, penetrating someone's flesh. I'm talking about the sleeping bag kill, obviously.
Oh, I know.
Because, at a certain point, you gotta come up with all the human body is an infinitely destroyable thing. And if you just rely on, jabbing somebody in the gut over and over again, there's no art.
No, there isn't. I just watched, I actually just finished the first half of a long-running project I'm doing where I'm trying to watch and review every single slasher movie that came out in the 1980s. I just finished 1984. This project has taken me a decade. I'm trying to...
That is the project of a lifetime, man. That's not a project to finish in a weekend.
No, absolutely not. It's nearly 500 movies. And
nearly 500 movies through the end of 1984 or through the end of the 1980s?
The whole project. So
okay.
January 1st, 1980 through December 31st, 1989.
All right.
So I've seen about 240 or so of them.
Oh, that fascinates me because I would have assumed that the decade was front-loaded.
Well, see, no, here's the thing. Well, first of all, it's actually quite emphatically not.
Huh.
But that's because the slasher Silver Age that was kind of minted by Nightmare on Elm Street coming out also coincided with the rise of direct-to-video and shot-on-video technology.
Oh, of course.
So all of the I have the list of everything, and that list gets really expansive when you include Video Violence 2 and Death Nurse and all of that shit that was shot on video and just pumped to regional video stores.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 87 through 89 are just it's like a joke in a medieval comedy where the scroll just keeps on rolling to the floor.
Gotcha. And that's gonna be a tough period to get through, is my feeling.
Yeah, I am not.
DTV is the pits.
It really is. It's gonna be something and a half. I mean, I've been through the ringer already. I know what to expect, but it's 89 is the year that sucked the life out of even the best franchises. So I can't imagine what here. Actually, I literally have the list taped to the wall in front of me. So let's see what I I bet The House on Tombstone Hill probably isn't very good.
No, but it's got a good title.
It does. Another good title, Surgikill.
I have heard of that movie, as a matter of fact.
Hey. But yeah, so that's coming up. That's gonna be my my sad business later on.
It's like happy business. It's like I am watching the evolution of America's greatest screen comedian, and you're watching a whole bunch of direct-to-video movies about people with stage blood running out of their mouths.
Yes, but I like to approach the slasher movie in I think a way that you do too, in a kind of time capsule element, because I don't think anything really captured the progress of the 80s more than the slasher.
I fully agree. I've articulated this before, but it's been some years, so I think it is worth restating it, especially if we start talking about the state of modern horror and not just the state of 80s horror. Is that there is something wonderful about cheap genre filmmaking in that it has to rely on the world around it for production value. And this is something I first noticed, actually, I think when I was watching Halloween 2, which is not even a particularly cheap slasher movie. But it felt more like I remember my childhood vision of the 80s than literally any other movie I have ever seen.
Yes.
And I think there's something very special that slasher movies are uniquely good at, but, I think just in general cheap horror, they can't afford to dress the world. The money gets spent on the makeup. If there's a little bit of extra money, they maybe get one good actor. But that's...
They usually don't.
They usually don't, but that's because there's usually not money, because these are fucking direct-to-video. They're made for like $50,000. So that's what I love about these films, is there is that weird documentary feeling to them, where it's like, this is just what 86, for example, this is just what it looked like. This is what people wore. This is what spaces were. This is what a house looked like in 86. And I think that's a really remarkable thing, especially because it's in the midst of these just utterly artless garbage movies in some cases that end up having, in a way, more value as like documents of the society that produced them than a real movie does.
Yeah, no, that's something that is endlessly fascinating. Like especially, and as far even it also allows you to kind of enter a space as well as a time, because like I just watched The Mutilator from 1984, and that film is set like in this off-season beach town in, I believe, North Carolina. And basically it was made by the town, like just a bunch of people who lived there who were working together to make a movie.
That's so awesome.
It's super awesome. They still screen it every year, like at a motel that's run by the director. And apparently most of the staff of the motel worked on the movie also, and it's just like it's
incredible.
It's just a town coming together to make a movie about people getting murdered. And you just get to see this place just totally unvarnished. And that's just so interesting. And shoot, I feel like I had another thing I wanted to bring up, but do I remember it? Oh, and also, I mean, as the slasher progresses, you're getting slashers from international territories as well. And you get to see to what point the 80s reached, say, Japan in Evil Dead Trap in 1988. Or I watched a Swedish slasher called Bloodaren, which means bleeders.
I love that.
And I found out that those Fjallraven backpacks that are really popular right now have been around in Sweden for a long time. And there's just a lot of really interesting stuff in that arena.
I'm curious, since you have the complete list of slasher films, how far did the slasher get internationally? Like, obviously Italy I knew about.
Just region-wise?
Yeah.
Let's see. At least as far as I've done so much research, but there's always more to do. I always end up finding at least one other unearthed title. Like I think this one's technically 1990, so I'm not covering it, but there's one from Turkey called, I think, Blood Mansion or something.
Okay.
So you got a couple in Japan. Italy had kind of moved beyond the slasher, but you get a couple post-giallo slashers in the 80s that are trying to do the American thing. So they're usually weaker. The UK had quite a few. Eastern Europe, quite a few. I've seen Indonesia, I mean, they were definitely into ripoffs, and they at least released a ripoff of Friday the 13th. There were quite a few Bollywood slashers, specifically made by the Ramsey brothers. They made quite a few of them, but I think there's one or two Bollywood ones that aren't, and a Tamil cinema one, so Tollywood. As far as I know, I don't know that there were any from the continent of Africa in the 80s, or at least any that have...
I mean, there was barely any film production from the continent of Africa, so that would not necessarily surprise me.
Yeah. But continentally, you get some. In South America, you get some. Obviously, Mexico made quite a few.
Sure.
Then you get some from Brazil. I don't know about any of the other like Latin American countries. Like I'm not seeing much from like Argentina or Chile or anything, but Brazil had a couple.
Yeah, to a certain extent, I feel like South America follows kind of what I just said about Africa. Like I don't know a ton about South American production, but I feel like there was a movement in the mid to late 90s, which is when we see a lot of those national cinemas start to really become productive at the rate of more than like 3 films per year.
Yeah.
Which I think is something that for Americans it can be really hard to keep in mind. Many countries in the world that have like a well-defined national cinema that we see their movies and we love them if we frequent like film festivals or such, for many long periods of their development have like, there are years where like the Chilean film industry makes 9 movies total.
Yeah.
So like that happens, and I think that's just weird. Like I think Americans don't realize that, and it's a useful thing to be kept aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, the slasher was very robust in anywhere. And obviously, you have Canada, Australia, and there were a bunch in Hong Kong because Hong Kong was really pumping shit out in the 80s.
Oh yeah, great period for Hong Kong cinema.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're getting kind of your toes into a lot of different regional cinemas and that's been really interesting too.
Awesome.
But yeah, so I'm gonna stop listing countries, I think.
No, that's cool. That's fine. But no, that's a really cool project, and I'm glad it's continuing to go on. And you're more or less attacking that project chronologically, right? Like you're not just grabbing films; you're like trying to do 1984, and before that, you tried to do 1983.
Yeah, it's like largely chronological. In the early days, I was just kind of like, I'm gonna do all the Friday the 13th, and I'm gonna like and then I had like themed months where I was like, I'm gonna do a bunch of college slashers, and so I did jump around years a bit. But now I'm pretty much just charging down the list. I'm in 85 now. Next one is about a bunch of murders on a porno set. So Ty West, watch your back.
All right, I like that.
But yeah, so that's really exciting. But yeah, so do you think that we're seeing stuff in the modern day that reflects our culture in the same way that, you know, these shitty slasher films did?
You know, I think to a certain extent, we can't know that. I think
That's true.
That is something that emerges in retrospect. And certainly, I think if I go back to 1981 and I say, hey, this Halloween 2, that's a movie that's really captured something about the way that Halloween is celebrated in the 1980s. And, like, the thing that really always lands on me is, like, there was this, like, thing that people used to do where we had, like, these little cardboard cutouts of pumpkins or witches or cats or whatnot. And I have expropriated some of these from my grandmother's house that I think she had in the 60s, and we still were getting them in the 80s. And I just don't think those exist anymore. Like, I don't feel if you decorate your house for Halloween in the year of our Lord 2022, or if you decorated in the year of our Lord 2021, I don't think you get these little cardboard, like, poster stock things that you tack up to your wall with a tack, or like that little gooey, like, clay or whatnot. And that's something that I think when you're in it, you don't realize, like, this is going to timestamp my movie. Like, this manufacturer of these cardstock decorations, this is an 80s manufacturer. I don't think you realize that kind of thing. So, like, in terms of the iconography, I don't think when you're in it, you really know what your period looks like. Certainly in terms of, like, what is this culture about? I don't think you can ever tell in the moment. I think you can only ever tell that retrospectively. Like, when people were in the Reagan era, I think they knew that Reagan was president, but I don't know if they knew what the Reagan era meant.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, you do need the hindsight. You need the ability to, you know, take the microscope to look at everything in a broad perspective and to be able to inspect all of it. Mm-hmm. And that's just not something you have the ability to do. Well, I'm excited to have this conversation in 10 years.
Exactly. So we'll see you all in 10 years, everybody. But no, I do think it's possible, certainly, to look at trends that are going on and say, like, what we know what pop culture is doing. We know what kind of things we can see. So even though I don't know if we can necessarily make broad scale statements about what does it tell us about life in 2022, I think we can certainly say, like, here's what's happening. So what is happening? Tell me, Brennan.
Well, we certainly like to make films about trauma right now.
We do.
And we're very excited about it, and we know that trauma is art, so these ones are art.
Just had a conversation a couple days ago with my boyfriend about Midsommar, which I think he liked more than I did based on how that conversation sort of flowed. I don't think he still liked it very much, mind you. But we got to talking about how perhaps you remember Midsommar, Brennan. That is a film about trauma.
Absolutely.
It's also a film about being in a bad relationship.
Yes.
But it's about those two things simultaneously.
But that opening scene with, like, what's going on with her family, that's trauma porn is shit. Like,
exactly.
And that's Ari Aster's go-to so far, because Hereditary is all about trauma.
Indeed.
And passing on trauma to your children and whatnot. And I don't think that's a bad thing to explore, but the idea of it being a trend, and I am a little sick of every single lead character just being bummed out about something.
This is the thing, is like, I am a person who has on and off throughout my adult life wrestled with depression. I don't want to fucking watch a movie about it. It's not interesting. It's not dynamic. That's the whole point of it. Is just kind of sullen. I want to see movies about people doing shit, not just sitting around being sad. So, like, I do tire of it. I also, when you confront me with Laurie Strode, who is an industrious and well-equipped young woman in 1978, who is thoughtful and makes good choices and saves the lives of the children she's been charged with saving. I feel good about that character. I feel good about where she's landed. I feel like she's going to make it. And then you flash forward 40 years and you tell me, guess what? She spent every minute of the last 40 years in a cabin paranoid. It's like, well, that doesn't make me feel good at all. I don't like that.
Yeah.
This is a complete tangent. It's the same. It's like my biggest reason why I really don't like the Star Wars sequels. It's like, oh, so you fought so hard to beat the Empire, and then you had it for like 3 minutes, and then you lost, and now the Empire's back. Like, what sort of bullshit is that? You guys aren't heroes, you're dicks.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, that's a problem with sequel storytelling as well. You have to reintroduce conflict.
Right. Exactly.
And
the Star Wars films could have been about the conflict of running a complicated bureaucracy, and how there are departments that you need to negotiate between.
Perhaps an international trade federation of some kind?
I'm going to say, I'm basically saying the sequels needed to be more like the prequels, so damn me. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Star Wars.
No, we're not. But okay, tonally, it can be different. Because, like, look at the Laurie Strode of 2018's Halloween, and that's just a fucking bummer. And also, they mishandle a lot of stuff about.
And that's the other thing. It's like they're still fucking slasher movies. They're still horror movies. They're still about sort of that visceral gut punch. There's a degree to which it feels tawdry to bring in these actual serious topics.
Yes, very much. Or at least it's all about tone. Because I think the traumatized Laurie of Halloween H2O is a very different beast than the traumatized Laurie of Halloween 2018. And say what you will about Halloween H2O, but that movie's trying to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically, like, I mean, in terms of, like, psychological realism, obviously that's not happening, but just, like, seeing her, like, downing a Cabernet in front of Adam Arkin, like, that is a camp more than it is, like, reveling in trauma. And
I completely agree with you, and, like, I don't want to give H2O too much credit because I don't really like it very much, but it handles that. It makes Laurie feel like she's evolved from the first film in a far more natural and satisfying way. that I think 2018 does.
Yeah, and the answer to the trauma, because obviously if you're bringing back Laurie, she's gonna be a little fucked up, but their answer to that is like having her move, having her change her name, and she has some trouble around Halloween for good reasons, but she has a life, like she has something to fight for, and that's not what it's just like trauma dump 2018 is giving us, and there is no reason to ask that these films reflect reality in any way. So it doesn't need to be. Even if it's like maybe that's how that woman would turn out, it doesn't fucking matter. It's about an immortal madman with a knife, you know.
It's about an ancient druid curse who's her twin brother. It's all of these things. The very important building blocks of this Halloween franchise.
Yeah. So it's just silly, and that's not to say that all of these movies are bad. Like, I really, really liked The Night House with Rebecca Hall.
I haven't seen that.
I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite movies of 2021, I think, is when it came out.
I can't remember. That's right.
But that movie, because it is a husband died trauma movie, but she plays it in this really like prickly, almost sarcastic way. Like there's something caustic to her that has an energy to it.
I like that. And something that sort of occurs to me that ties this back in what we were talking about the first half of the episode, and my sort of tetchiness around like very allegorical, message-driven cinema. Like, I think films that really end up telling us about the culture that made them after the fact, like we go back to the 60s, they're never the films that wanted to. Like,
yes.
If you want to learn about race relations in the United States in 1967, the film you're not going to watch is Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, because that's going to give you such a manicured, up-its-own-ass version of it. You're going to watch, like, some sort of, crummy little action movie or whatever. Like, that's where you're really going to see what's going on, and I feel like that to me is part of the difficulty with these, like, very self-consciously about trauma movies, is it's not natural, it's not organic, it's like they're forcing it onto the movie, so it doesn't feel like they're getting anything authentic with it.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because you're right, because there are, I mean, I'm also not thinking
because like
about...
when Kevin Williamson writes H2, it's Kevin Williamson who wrote H2O, right?
Not credited, but he almost certainly had a hand in it.
Who is the credited author?
Actually, I don't know. Let me double check.
Well, whoever wrote H2O, they undoubtedly thought to themselves, well, Laurie'd be fucked up. And what they clearly were thinking of at least a little bit was, it's a good movie is Terminator 2.
Exactly.
Because Terminator 2 is a good movie. But they're not consulting with the DSM-4 or DSM-5 or whichever one we had in 1998. They're not trying to, like, make the movie about trauma. They're just like, well, she'd be fucked up, so let's write her list she was fucked up. And that they're going with it. And it feels better, I think, as a result.
Yeah. And for the record, Halloween H2O, it's Robert Zappia and Matt Greenberg.
Okay.
You know them, you love them.
Can't believe I forgot those two household names. Sorry to both of you. You are professional writers, and I'm not, and I'm proud of you both.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, but you're totally right. Like, and even in a metatextual way, like even in a more polished movie, because we talked about obviously how low budget movies have no choice but to reflect the culture around them. All movies in some way reflect the culture around them, but the ones that aren't trying to do it better, like A Fish Called Wanda. I can learn a lot about how gay people were perceived in the UK by straight white men from that movie more than a movie that was specifically talking about it.
Sure, 100%.
Because of the jokes that they make, you can tell things about jokes, about casting, like the way that they choose to construct the movie informs you on what that time period was like.
100%. No, so anyways, we kind of got on a great big blocky tangent there, but yes, modern horror movies are about trauma. Very much so. So many of them. It's what they love being about the most.
Yeah, and some of them are about IP and trauma.
I know, and I will say a movie that is about IP and trauma, and I think is quite good at being about both of those things. We've talked about it, but I thought the new Scream actually handled being about trauma in a much better way than the new Halloweens have.
Absolutely. Well, because it's not a bummer. It was not interested in being that.
Right, and also I think Scream 2 is one of the absolute all-time best. Not that it's a contemporary movie anymore. Scream 2 is about like recovering from that sort of event in a way that I think is better than just about any other slasher sequel.
Oh, absolutely. And well, because the thing about any horror film with a final girl structure, sometimes the idea that by completing the end of the movie you have solved your own problem is disingenuous. And I remember talking about that in some shitty movie we watched recently. But like in a movie like that where it's like, all right, you got to deal with a slasher killer by murdering another slasher killer, and it's just a basic catharsis. It's like, sure, I'll buy that. You know, it's a slasher movie.
I'm looking for pop psychology. Again, I'm not looking for Friday the 13th Part 9 to tell me about the human condition. I'm looking for it to keep me entertained with a lot of death scenes and give me enough plausibility in the characters that I don't feel like I'm being lied to.
Yeah, I do not want Tommy Jarvis to return and stare out of a rainy window and cry.
No, I want Tommy Jarvis to fucking hit people with a machete, or possibly hit people with a machete.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no. The thing about movie trauma and genre movies is that it, like you said, it should turn you into Linda Hamilton. That's just how it's supposed to go.
This is further proof that Jim Cameron is the only filmmaker I care about.
Anyway, are there any other trends you're recognizing in modern horror cinema, though?
So I do think we are living through a remarkable period for calling back to like actual slasher cinema. And when I say actual slasher cinema, I sort of mean the thing that existed sort of in a form as early as like Black Christmas, sort of in a form as late as like the Scream sequels. But I'm really talking about the thing that exists between, say, Friday the 13th Part 1 and Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Like that sort of window of time when there's this very clear thing that is the slasher film that really quickly goes away in the 1990s, I would say. And doesn't really come back. Like it comes back locally. Like we have the Screams and the Halloween sequels of the 90s and I Know What You Did Last Summer, but like you get to the 2000s and the gory horror film of choice is torture porn, which is really nothing like slashers, and slashers per se don't really exist in that period, again, except maybe 1 or 2 per year. And it feels like in the last couple of years, we've really seen a lot of like honest-to-God slasher movies. And some of them have been terrible and some of them have been good, just like the actual slasher movies.
Yeah, that's how it goes. But yeah, but that's been something that's been really, I've been like a pig in shit over here on that front.
And I do think sort of even more generally than that, just like, I mean, much in the same way that I think a lot of sort of more mass culture, like, comic book movies, are really all about like nostalgia and the brands you love. There is some of the brands you love. I mean, Scream had a new film this year, but I do feel like there's a lot of more generally like throwback stuff. Like we talked about Ty West and killing people instead of a porno. X is a film I thought was quite good. That is just kind of like, what's cool? 70s horror movies are cool. Let's make a 70s horror movie. And it's not like any one specific kind of 70s horror movie. You got a little bit of slasher. You got a little bit of sort of more Texas Chainsaw. A little bit more of something like Let's Scare Jessica to Death, where it's that kind of like pastoral gauziness. But we got that. We've got this cottage industry of people doing giallo throwbacks. So I do think that that's also a trend, is people just like trying to find the cool stuff and like do a modern day version of it.
Yeah, which ultimately is I think fine, because especially when it's doing an original thing. Because there's only so many genres and subgenres. We're not going to keep tripping over new, like, mediums. The idea that, every single movie that comes out has to be based on a comic book or a book that existed 30 years ago can be exhausting, especially because we keep pulling from the same time period over and over again. We're like, look, I love the 80s, but there were other times. We got other shit to look at. And we're behind. We're due for a revival of like cinema set in the early 2000s, and it's not coming.
I'm not ready for that.
Oh, I'm so ready.
I don't want it. I will be incredibly hostile to it when it comes.
I mean, that's totally fine. But, like, you know, every decade of cinema historically is like, or, you know, like, Grease came out in the 70s and was set in the 50s. Like, we tend to jog back 20, 25 years.
Yeah, about 20, 25 years, yeah.
And we're missing the boat because we're stuck in the fucking Stranger Things.
I think part of that is that there is no natural bridge because the 90s were such a desolate decade for iconography. Like the 90s didn't exist. As a teenager in the 90s, I feel like I can vouch for this. They were either the late 80s or the early 2000s, but they had no identity of their own. So I think you like the idea of doing a 90s throwback, and we saw one. We saw the Fear Street movies on Netflix, which to me just reveals the empty signifier at the heart of it. Like, there is no such thing as a 90s throwback. I don't know how you could do that. I don't know what it would consist of. It would be like you could use grunge, I guess, but grunge was a subculture that was done by 1993 anyway. So
yeah, you've got grunge. You got, I guess, some of that weird Nickelodeon shit.
Sure. And I mean, I guess at some point we're going to start seeing like edgy versions of Nickelodeon cartoons for adults. I don't know.
I'm sure. I mean, well, no, never mind. Yeah, that could happen.
I guess we're on the third Powerpuff reboot is coming out, so I guess that's a thing.
Yeah, that's something. And then there's also like I think, you know, other than the like 90s postmodern slasher wave at the very end, like you got the 90s teen movie is a thing.
It is.
But yeah, culturally, it is whatever. I
like there's not a distinct form of music. There's not a distinct form of like apparel. It's just it was a non-period. So like I get why that kind of disrupted the nostalgia cycle. Because I think I can see how you could be nostalgic for the early 2000s. I can certainly see how you could be nostalgic for the 80s. I truly don't see how you could be nostalgic for the 90s.
Yeah, totally fair. And also, any fashions from the 90s are just horrible, which is the point, I guess. But yeah, whatever. I'm excited for, you know, a throwback where like people have Hillary Duff posters on the walls. Like I'm ready for that.
Sure, that's fair.
Yeah, then in 30 years, the version of like what Thor: Love and Thunder is doing with its soundtrack, it's all gonna be Metamorphosis by Hillary Duff, and it's gonna be great.
Good lord. But how do we get on that track? Oh, just talking about like horror as a sort of series of throwbacks. And I guess what I would say to sort of wrap up that thought is like what's weird because you are correct. The nostalgia cycle is 20 years ish, 25 years. Most of the throwback stuff that I'm seeing feels like it's throwing back to the 70s, which is now knocking on 50 years ago.
Yeah, we're going backwards. Which, you know, it is what it is. I don't think nostalgia in and of itself is a bad thing. It is or at least it is a thing that is extremely common and happens all the time and shouldn't necessarily be viewed as shameful because that's just how it works. It's just a human thing.
And to me, it is just a human thing. When it produces something like X or The Strange Color of Your Body's Tears, hey, great. It's better than anything else we're getting, so I'm for it. It's weird how it works, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing about the current kind of cinema slate that's not weird. That's
really true. Cinema's not in a good way. That is my very cool take.
Yeah, it's not in a good way. I think creatively, I think I can give more credit to certain things. Like I'm not like definitely not going to bat for like the Marvel stuff or whatever. Like I go see all the Marvel stuff and I have an okay time most of the time, but that's not what I'm talking about. I think that people can look too hard at that and ignore the fact that there are some cool things that exist still, and get a little too down in the dumps about it. But economically, I don't know how movies are gonna keep getting made in the next 10 years. It doesn't make any sense.
It feels like a very very like the Silicon Valley disruption thing, where it's like, let's come in, let's do streaming, let's change how movies are made. They succeeded in breaking how movies were made, and it is increasingly clear they did not replace it with something else that is sustainable, and that is a problem. And we are going to see those chickens come home to roost.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's not what we're talking. This is a long enough podcast as it is. That's a different conversation.
And one thing we did just sort of breeze by. We talked about trauma, but we have not used that term that is so disputed and contentious, elevated horror. Which is where you see all of that trauma happen. All those stories about people. Not so much stories about killers, but about sadness and relationships. And the real horror was your toxic mother and shit like that. That is kind of the thing. Like the 80s had slasher films. And 90s had postmodern slasher films. And the 2000s had torture porn. And we have elevated horror right now.
We certainly do.
And what is your feeling about
elevated horror? So, I think, like, what?
I guess I would start by saying, is that a phrase we feel okay to use? We the editorial we.
I actually don't mind using it to describe that movement of a genre. I think that the term kind of inherently comes with a sense of irony for me. But it is a term that, when it is used as a way to praise a film, I'm not down with that. But as a term for the idea of just like what these types of movies are trying to do, I find it totally fine. Because
there's definitely a type of movie, and it is the type of movie disproportionately released by the distributor A24.
Yep.
So there is a type. There's a thing that's happening, and you see it crop up in things like the Halloween reboot. So. Yes.
So for me, I think like any cinematic subgenre, there are good ones and there are bad ones. But I think that it's more the conversation around it that is extremely frustrating. Because it buys into the idea that in order to be good, something has to be serious, and that is just fundamentally incorrect.
Agreed.
Because there are great things in both of those categories. There is great art that makes you think and that makes you process things differently and all of that, and that's great. Like, I love, Pedro Almodovar's The Human Voice. That was one of my favorite pieces of cinematic anything in the last 5 years, probably.
It's great.
It's so fucking good. But also, I love Robert Rodriguez's Spy Kids, which is an inherently unserious movie, but every single thing in that movie is perfectly calibrated to make it the thing that it is.
I have not seen Spy Kids. I was 21 when it came out.
Yeah.
I would say about The Human Voice and Almodovar generally, but I'd say that more so than a lot of what he's done recently. For that to be your go-to example of serious fascinates me, because to me, he is playing a game with The Human Voice.
He is.
Like,
well, okay, maybe not serious in tone, but it is like art cinema.
It is art cinema, but there is art cinema that is still a blast, and Almodovar is that to me. There's also art cinema that's like, you are going to eat your vegetables and they were undercooked and there's no salt on them.
Yeah, okay, you're right. That I was just thinking of, I guess, how seriously people take it versus how serious the like tone is. But you're right. I drifted off my own topic.
I mean, like, no, I just like it that, because I do agree with you. I think that there is such a thing as, the stuff we're meant to take seriously and the stuff we're meant to just kind of vibe with and the stuff we're meant to just have fun with. But even within the good stuff, the more serious stuff, there's still like a spectrum of, am I like here to think, or am I here to just kind of like feel it in my guts? And I feel Almodovar in my guts. And to me, that's kind of the distinction I would draw, is like, is it a movie that's taking place in my brain or sort of in my chest? And I tend to prefer movies that take place in my chest, by and large.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, so and elevated horror is very much the brain movie.
Exactly.
And I think those types of movies can work.
I think for sure can. I think some of them are very good. But, for me, the sort of quintessential example of a movie that is super smart and super full of commentary and themes, where it is really not the movie's vibe is Night of the Living Dead, which is a movie that is a fucking great, oh my god, they're zombies. Oh my god, look, they're just tearing chunks of meat out and shoving it in their mouths. Oh my god, the little girl's stabbing her mother with a trowel. And when you walk away from it, you can come up with, like, here's what we just learned. We learned a lot about, like, how humans interact in a period of stress. We learned a lot about, you know, how society is structured. But that's not what the movie's doing. And to a certain extent, I feel like one of the things that elevated horror thinks it has to be is, like, well, it can't be fun. It can't just be, like, oh, no, he's in a bear suit and he's going to get burned alive. It has to be like, well, he's in a bear suit because we're going to learn all of this about toxic masculinity. And it's like, it's giving us a lecture rather than just kind of, like, socking it to us. And I don't like that it's that, because to me, part of the joy of horror is that it does feel like it sort of can just sock it to me. And I don't get socked by an Ari Aster film.
Okay, well, I'm curious. So
by certain bits in Hereditary, I do. Anyways.
Yeah. No, there are visceral moments in what he creates, and in a lot of that elevated horror sphere. But let me ask you this: so one of the movies that's, like, primarily kind of credited with being sort of the beginning or part of the beginning of this current rise is The Babadook from 2014.
Yep.
And that movie, to me, is a movie that socks you in the chest, even though it's not like it's not like you know, the classic kind of 80s horror film. It's not, like, super gory. It's not super in your face about the things that it's doing. It is subtle, but it is trying to punch you.
Mm-hmm. And I think what that comes down to is Jennifer Kent there wasn't a thing called elevated horror that she was doing. There wasn't a, like, oh, well, what if instead of horror being horrifying, horror was thought-provoking? She's just like, I'm just going to make a movie. And she made it. And it was so good that it then triggers this wave of imitators. But I think that's, again, that gets us sort of the Jordan Peele thing. Like, some people are just too good at making movies to, like, trip themselves up with being like, it's going to be elevated. And again, she wasn't inserting herself into something that already existed. She was just doing something that sounded like it was going to be good, and it was.
That's a good point. Well, yeah, okay, I guess this goes into
and
the same conversation.
I would actually, the movie that came out right around the same time, It Follows, I think it's sort of the same thing.
No, totally, because, it's basically the people... It's the same thing we talked about with Jordan Peele, is that some people see the idea in the good movie and say, well, I will make the idea, and then that's more of the problem. Like, because horror filmmakers have had ideas forever.
Of course.
Like Rosemary's Baby, which came out the same year as Night of the Living Dead.
Yep.
Like, that is a film that could slot very well into the idea of what elevated horror is supposed to be.
For sure.
But it's a different thing. It's just a good horror film that is more about subtlety. It's less about the you know, train of jump scares or whatever.
Right.
But it is still fundamentally and authentically a horror film and not a thesis.
Exactly. And here to me, I hate to keep bagging on Ari Aster, but I feel he is kind of like the elevated horror guy.
Yeah, he's the poster child.
He's the poster child. The story about the production of Midsommar, that when I learned about it, I was like, oh, well, of course that's how that movie got made. Ari Aster had an idea for a film about a toxic relationship that was falling apart and sort of the kind of state of heightened mental awfulness that grows out of that. A24 pitched him, we really want to make a horror movie set in Scandinavia. And he was like, okay, I can do that. I can put the toxic relationship travels to Scandinavia. And to me, it feels like a movie that was these two things just kind of shopped together because, like, why don't we do that? So it's not a movie that, like, grows into what it is. It's a movie that is, like, fabricated. And I feel at least you can get that sense just watching it. I'm down on Midsommar. I mean, if it's not clear already from this conversation, I gave it 3 stars at the time I saw it, and I have only gone down from there.
Yeah, I think I'm not an Ari Aster fan either. I think both of his films have independent scenes and moments that are memorable and that are really good. Mm-hmm. But as a piece, they're not really for me. And
to me, the 2 scenes from those movies that really landed hard for me are scenes that are totally unrelated to any of the ideas. It's the spoiler alert for these 2 movies. It's the scene with the character's head getting knocked off by a sign in Hereditary,
Yep.
and it's the mallet scene in Midsommar.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's just like, it's fine for movies to want to be a bummer. It's not what I
don't need
want.
movies not to be a bummer. I mean, fucking Dawn of the Dead is a bummer. Like, all these apocalyptic horror films are bummers, but they can still be bummers that are, like, trying to be good movies. And I just feel like Ari Aster in particular, I think, is trying too hard to be like, he's presenting us with a thesis statement, as you said.
Yeah, and that's how you get that, like, kind of turgid shit like Antebellum or whatever.
Yeah, no, the incredible cottage industry of people trying to make Get Out who aren't Jordan Peele. There hasn't been a single good one.
Yeah. Well, what did you think of the new Candyman that merged that kind of instinct with,
It is
the horror with ideas that Candyman was?
Candyman was as good, I think, as it could have turned out. I think it is a solid movie. It is, I think, also not remotely as good as the first Candyman.
No.
Which, I mean, the first Candyman itself would have been elevated horror. I think Clive Barker's entire thing, if it came out now, we would call Clive Barker someone who makes elevated horror. But he was also someone who was working through the fucked up shit in his brain first. And that's what his movies are. And they happen to have, like, all of these weird resonances as a side effect of that.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's about intention. Because generally the horror movies that have solid ideas that have come out before this, like, elevated horror craze, like, people were, they were looking to make a horror film. But then when you're writing a script, you're like, I gotta hook it on something.
Right.
And that's where the ideas come in.
Exactly.
But these are idea films that are hooked onto the horror genre.
I think that's a perfect way of phrasing it. They arrive at horror as the thing that will get butts in seats rather than arriving at the idea as the thing that structures the movie.
Yeah, and it that's just an exhausting thing.
Yep.
To have to sit through.
And,
like, did you see Lamb? I never saw Lamb.
Oh God, fucking Lamb. Even calling it elevated horror is giving it too much benefit of doubt. It's horror for its last 8 minutes.
Oh, ooh, what a thrill!
It is a slog. Boy, that movie blew. But yeah, I mean, so we get things like Lamb, and we get things like, I think you see it infecting things like Halloween 2018 comes out because, like, ooh, this is what we do now. We make movies about trauma. And it's not a terribly satisfying Halloween film as a result. And Halloween Kills even more so, which is a film about mob justice.
Jesus Christ. That... I don't even want to talk about it.
Halloween Kills is a bad movie. Halloween Kills is like bottom tier Halloween sequel.
Yeah, it's just like, I try to approach any sequel on its own merits because I've seen enough slasher and horror sequels to be like, not be precious about an original if I love the original. And there are many Halloween sequels that I love, but just if I never hear Evil Dies Tonight ever again, it will be too long. Anyway. That's a movie that very much, when a movie is just really hitting its thesis, and especially when its thesis is so stupid, and just keeps dragging it out in front of you and going, you like it? Look at this. It's just a miserable experience.
It really, really is. It's like, give me a movie that I want to watch first, and then give me what else you want after you've already got me watching it. But don't, like, make me feel like I have to sit down for a shitty freshman seminar to watch a movie about Michael Myers stabbing people in the face.
Yeah. Did you hear the new one's gonna involve a plotline about the COVID pandemic?
I am furious beyond my ability to articulate it about that fact. But yes.
Yeah, I think the two upcoming film things that make me most mad are that and the fact that they're making Wicked into 2 films.
Why are they making Wicked into 2 films?
I barely want to watch one Wicked film.
That's the thing, is like, how many musicals have been turned into movies after a 2-act theatrical structure, but it's one movie? It's not like sitting through Wicked the musical on stage is a 7-hour experience. It's a 2.5-hour musical. Make it one goddamn movie.
Yeah, it makes absolutely no sense, and it's just like hire someone to write a shitty sequel musical if you have to.
Right? He
There
wrote
are
2
more
other books.
Yeah. Oh dear Lord, it's gonna be something.
Yeah, talk about not
And
going
you
to
know
horror.
they're both gonna be 2.5 hours. Yeah.
Exactly.
Poor John M. Chu. He deserves better than
He
that.
really does. But
Anyway, also when is the sequel to Crazy Rich Asians gonna come out? I'm sorry, I don't believe in this movie.
I think at this point it has missed its window of opportunity.
Yeah, I just don't see it happening. It doesn't. Well, whatever. I'm not. It's not like I'm aching at the or champing at the bit for a China Rich Girlfriend because that book has nothing to offer as source material, so it could only be a shitty movie.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just they shit the bed on that one.
Yeah. But just to wrap up our conversation about horror,
Yeah,
before we get
whoops.
too far afield talking about terrible sequels and terrible sequels that might not even come out, are there any other things in horror this day and age that you think are interesting to talk about? Or what are the horror movies that you have been enjoying?
Well, let me pull Letterboxd. But I mean, obviously, I've been enjoying. I really loved the new Scream movie. I'm a sucker for Scream, and I'm excited by the kind of resurgence of slashers, just because that's the thing that I love.
Mm-hmm.
Like this upcoming weekend, we have They Slash Them and Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. Neither of which looks like it's going to be a particularly great
That
movie,
feels
but
like a double feature from hell. I won't lie. And I'm very pleased that you are on the hook for writing both of those reviews.
Oh, totally. You're welcome. I'm happy about it. Look, we both know not to approach a slasher movie thinking it's going to be particularly good.
Yeah. Also, on the subject of movies that seem to have decided on their themes before they started writing their screenplay. Holy balls.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's something.
I don't even know which of those 2 films I'm talking about when I said that, but I'm talking about one of them for sure.
Mm-hmm. Paranormal Activity's back. They're bad. This new one was really bad. They're making another one.
Oh, that's right. It was a Paramount Plus original, right?
Yeah, there was Next of Kin, which was just abysmal. Like deeply disturbingly like worse than the Ghost Dimension, which I didn't think was going to be possible.
Pretty bad.
God, what else? I mean, horror. I mean, I'm scrolling through like modern horror that I've seen, and it's so much IP, and that's just kind of also where we're at with mostly everything. Like, you got your Don't Breathe 2, you got Spiral from the Book of Saw, and The Forever Purge, and Conjuring 3. Like, a lot of those movies are doing something semi-unexpected, I guess, as far as using IP willy-nilly in a strange way.
The Conjuring universe is a fascinating thing, which appears to be done now. Like, they don't, I think, have anything in production in that franchise.
Oh, yeah. Oh. That's a great point. I just always assume there's another one coming.
It's been a few years.
Yeah. And there was always that Crooked Man movie that was supposed to be happening, but I never believed that was
No,
ever
I
gonna
never
come to
ever
the screen.
believed any of the like Conjuring 2 spin-offs were actually going to happen. But yeah, we never got a Conjuring 3. I mean, Annabelle Comes Home was kind of the Conjuring 3. But
No, we did.
oh yeah, we did. It was awful. It was so awful that I overwrote it in my brain.
Yeah, was it called The Devil Made
The
Me
Devil
Do
Made
It?
Me
Or is
Do
that...
It. The Devil Made
Oh,
Me Do It.
Yeah, that movie was terrible.
It was terrible.
Yeah, Annabelle seems done. Conjuring seems done. I mean, I wouldn't be mad if they got a good screenwriter and put that person onto and making La Llorona 2.
I would be on board with a Nun too.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know where that went.
And I will say, this summer I did honestly quite enjoy The Black Phone. I thought it was better than I thought it was going to be, and it did kind of make me sort of feel like in a weird. There's been this kind of weird spur of like nostalgia property and IP where we've had the kind of like Stranger Things-esque movie.
Oh yeah, we didn't even bring that up.
And we have that. We have the first part of It.
Mm-hmm.
We have, insofar as we feel comfortable calling it a horror movie, Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Yep, many of which star Finn Wolfhard.
I mean, he seems to be the glue. But
Yeah.
I do find I think there's some legs to that, and maybe someone who liked the Black Phone less than I did would disagree, but I do think there's something to. I mean, kids as horror movie protagonists is something that hasn't really been done very hard, but I think it works because kids are inherently likelier to die horribly than adults because they're kids. They are less sophisticated. They are less equipped to deal with the horrible things in the world. So I think they're easier characters to sort of build those kinds of creepy narratives around, and I would like it if that turned into more of a ongoing thing. But I kind of feel like it is a little bit. But I don't know.
Yeah, no, that totally is. Yeah, I think that's a good one because that's one that's kind of still starting to crop up, and it's kind of creeping around the edges.
And the fact that the Black Phone is doing quite well financially, I think we're going to get at least a couple knockoffs of the Black Phone, and they'll probably be bad, but I'm curious to see where that goes.
Yeah, the license more of Joe Hill's stuff. We'll see if we can make anything out of it. Yeah, I think we gotta stop talking, probably.
I think that's probably a good idea. I was concerned we weren't even going to break an hour, and here we are. So thank you all for listening.
Yeah, thank you all for listening. Look, really, we're just delaying Tim to having to go see Super Pets.
Well, fortunately, you have kicked me now from the mid-afternoon screening to the late-afternoon screening of Super Pets, so I feel good about that.
You're so welcome. If it's any consolation, Super Pets has proven from the demographics that I'm able to view through my work, adults don't really care about Super Pets.
Why would they?
Or like just general film people, so it might not stick around for that long. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, everybody. You can find more of Tim's reviews and mine on alternateending.com. Find more of our podcasts. We're going to be recording Bride of Alternate Ending a little later this week.
Yep.
We're talking about 1988's The Blob, so keep an eye out for that on the second Friday of August. And yeah, thanks so much for listening. I don't know what's happening next week, so I cannot tease that. We'll find out as we go,
indeed.
everyone.
Talk to you later, everybody.
Yeah, bye.